Yeah, but I mean, Dawn Steele and other women in your life have always talked about one of the wonderful things about you, and I just know because she's told me, but that you, I think Barbara talked about this too, is that you infuse them with your love of movies, all about movies. You are known as having this encyclopedic knowledge of film in terms of being able, for a whole series of films, tell you every credit that
well, at some point, I mean, really I can do that mainly from films in the 40s to the 50s to the early 60s. When I started working on films myself, I started seeing less of them. Yeah. You know, but I think what we're really talking about is that it's not just movies. That they're not just movies to me. They're, in many respects, having had asthma, my father taking me to the movie theater constantly because I couldn't play sports or anything. He never really talked to me very much when I was a kid, and so that was a way of talking. That was a way of experiencing strong emotional, whether it was Kirk Douglas and Lana Turner in The Bad and the Beautiful, or it was James Mason in The Desert Fox, or it was On the Town, or American in Paris, you know, any of these things. It was a way of experiencing emotion, of feelings. If I wanted to say I loved you to him, which I didn't, it was through that film, you see. Yeah. And the same way with him to me. And my mother to a certain extent also, my older brother too. And so in a funny way, they're not just movies to me. It was a way of expressing emotion and a way of learning a little about life and using these as examples of how to live. You can't take, I mean, not every film. What I mean by that is that it's like, it becomes about life. The pictures I make, I'm talking about, it becomes about the fact that, yes, I adore these old movies and everything, because I can never make them. I wish I could have, but I'm not. I'm what I am. I do what I do now. And in the process of making the picture, I tried to learn about myself, learn about life. And I think talking about infusing enthusiasm to other people about it's mainly about that, not about the films. I'll talk about a certain scene in another film that was made 20 years ago, and we can laugh about it, act out the whole scene, and then we go to shoot our scene, and we're sort of revved up for that energy level, you see. But there's a certain kind of truth in those scenes. There's certain kinds of truths in Vincent Minnelli's film version of Lust for Life, in scenes between Anthony Quinn and Kirk Douglas, where they're arguing about painting and art, you know. And then suddenly that snaps something, and you go off into another scene for yourself, and we try to find the truth in those things, and because the truth is enjoyable and painful and a lot of fun.
The making of movies still have the same magic for you, the same joy, satisfaction?
Well, as you get a little older, and the pictures sometimes, they all get harder.
Why?
Well, I'm trying in each one to try something new, to push an envelope, as you were talking about in Age of Innocence. I know that people say, well, yeah, that Age of Innocence is a picture where it's not going to be representative of the kind of work I've done, normally. But I want to learn something, too, as a director. And as long as I can have some sort of an umbilical cord of emotional resonance, some way in which I could feel what those characters are feeling, then I don't care what they're wearing. I don't care what age it takes place in.
Then can you go ahead?
No, I was just saying, basically what I do for relaxation is read novels of the ancient world by Mary Renault or Robert Graves and that sort of thing.
And he talked about John Cassavetes. There is a story, which may or may not be true, about you and Cassavetes after Boxcar Bertha.
Right.
Cassavetes comes to you and says, look, you can do a lot better than this. Or if you really want to make movies, they have to be personal. They have to, well, you tell me.
He took me to his office, and it was at Universal. And he was always very funny, John. He was like, he's laughing. He looked at me. He said, hey, come here. And he grabbed me and he embraced me. And then he pulled me aside. He said, you just spent a year of your life making a piece of junk. He said, it's a nice picture. It's a nice film. Girl is good. The guys are good. You know, but you could do better than that, he said. You can't get stuck. I know you like B movies. I know you like the old movies coming out of Hollywood, but you do different things. You just do different things. And you should really stick to what you know. And in a sense there, I realized, yeah, maybe he's right. The reality is I'm not a Hollywood director. I mean, a director from the ones I wanted to be, like John Ford or Howard Hawks.
He understood that. That's sort of you wanted to remake John Ford. You wanted to find your way to be like John Ford and Billy Wilder and all those.
Right, but what I did have in mind was to combine what I knew, which was really a kind of a combination of a certain kind of reality with the actors that I saw Cassavetes and Kazan have. And mix that with the tradition of a Ford or an Orson Welles with the use of camera and that sort of thing. So I was trying to combine it all I got close, but it wasn't completely successful in New York, right. To a certain extent. It wasn't completely successful film. But I realized then that the only way to go. He said, don't you have something you really want to do? And I said, yeah, well, there's one script, Mean Streets, that we've been working on for about 5 years. He goes, well, take it out. Rewrite. I said, we'll need some rewrite. Well, rewrite it. Just what are you doing here?
Yes.
Just rewrite the thing, will you? Yeah. So we worked on it. A couple of friends of mine worked on it, and we sent it around, and gave us that shot in the arm we needed. Within a year, through some mutual friends, we met Jonathan Taplin, and he had the money to make the film.
Yeah. What's been the downest moment for you? When have you been in this really wonderful arc of a career that is going strong, Witness Casino opening here? When has it been for you where you questioned yourself? Never. Not to seem facile about it, but you do question yourself most of the time because it keeps you sharp, questioning yourself in terms of the work you're doing. Yeah. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right picture? Well, if I have this angle on it, there's certain kinds. I didn't question myself doing Last Temptation. Yeah. I didn't question myself doing Age of Innocence. That's for sure. And but you ask yourself, for example, in Casino, is this a different story? And is there something larger here? And how do I justify
making
for
a
me
film?
To make this film? Yeah,
exactly. And I found the ways, and I found it's in a sense a metaphor for us if we don't watch out in this country, where the compassion goes out the window and just more money, the more blood. Yeah. It's as simple as that. That's what the film shows, and it's as simple as that. And I mean, constantly, I've said this many times. What was really at the same time wonderful and scary is that when you get on the set, you realize every day that okay, I don't know anything. Okay, I don't know this, I don't know that. I think I know this. Let me work on this area here, and it's constantly a learning experience. Which, as you get older, forces you to try to streamline and just get to the essentials because you have no time to play with all the other stuff.
That was really your first introduction to Beyond the Neighborhood. Exactly,
yeah, because the high school I went to, Cardinal Hayes High School, which is a wonderful high school, was in the Bronx, but you just get in the subway. You don't see anything. Yeah. You stay in the subway 45 minutes, you're there, or in the Grand Concourse, But there's no doubt, I do love the city. I keep saying to myself, too, the lighting. I realize that my introduction to film was through writing and through editing rather than cinematography because I looked around. Over the years, I kept Michael Powell, the great director, he was able to tell the time by just looking at the sun in the sky. Right. And Steven Spielberg is able to tell because it was a wonderful story in Empire of the Sun. He arrived on the set early one morning because I asked him how he got this shot of the last kamikaze getting ready to get in their planes to go and fight and die. And they were silhouetted against the rising sun, a real rising sun. It was amazing. He said, well, I got there early, and I saw the mist on the ground, and I knew immediately the sun was going to come up that way. So he got the camera and shot the shot. I said, I'm in New York. If I saw mist on the ground like that, we'd run. Something's on fire. Yeah, exactly. So because he grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, it's a different thing. Me, lighting for me is, turn a light on in the hallway, and that's basically, I never really saw... I couldn't tell where the sun was. I couldn't tell from a cloudy day or a bright day because of the nature of the buildings we were in.
Shadows and everything.
Shadows, alleyways, hallways. And then in 1965, there was a city ordinance that every building has to have 2 lights out front. Right. And then we started to see the neighborhood a little bit at night. And then they got those new lamps, the street lamps. So then things started to brighten up. But up to that point, I never really understood where to put the light.
What is it about this thing of filmmaking that turns you on the most? What part of problem solving, what part of it? I mean, you sat as we watched this, and we watched the scene of the, and you said to me, as you said earlier in the conversation, it's hallucinatory because you're here and here and here, and all these lights and things are going on. You got rock music, and you got all kinds of stuff happening, and yet you plotted that out. Yes. I said storyboard, you said no. Miniaturization of storyboard.
Miniaturization of storyboards now,
But what is it about this process that... Is it the editing? Is it creating the scene?
For me, first of all, you need the story, you need the script to be there. You need the script to be there. You need it to be on the page in terms of the emotion and in terms of something with which the audience can empathize in terms of characters. You need the audience to care about somebody. Okay, that's one thing. So we've been taking over the years, we've been pushing the envelope on that, though, over the years with Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and particularly Raging Bull. and even Goodfellas and Casino. So we're pushing the edge there. How much can you care for a person if he's this bad or if she's that bad, you know? Can you still care? There's some out there I know can still care, so that's pretty good. Okay, now let's see if we can push a little more. Now, the only thing for me, though, is that that's one thing. That's got to be on the page. But then for me, it's literally the imagining of shots, one shot being cut to the other, and the emotional and psychological impact of that cut, and the movement of that cut. In other words, two shots together, two moving shots together, create another movement altogether in your mind that isn't there. Yeah. You see, it's almost like dance, like choreography, and that's why this was a tough one to do, because I had 1/3 of the film in the cab of an ambulance. 3 different ambulances, true, but it's an ambulance, you know. Right. And so how many times can you see spinners going, you know, what angles could you get? And I say, well, you know, to a certain extent you would say, listen, just do it simply. But I wanted to recreate that feeling I had driving around with the paramedics in New York at night. I wanted to recreate that hallucinatory feeling, especially of a man who's having somewhat of a breakdown in the picture. You know, he thinks he sees the peripheral vision tricks you in the street at night. You think you see somebody coming at you, there's nobody there. Yeah. You know, and that's what I wanted to get. So that was like a perfect reason for trying to make this film and put the shots together on paper.
So then you are saying the excitement of it for you, in terms of the ultimate excitement, after you've got a story, is figuring out how you can
visually interpret
this story.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
the key
if you
thing.
had to say that's the highest level of genius that you bring to it, forget genius, don't argue about it. I mean, that's what it is that your capacity to understand and make that happen.
I think so, but I also feel that
maybe a better word.
Yeah, I also feel that I have to like the people in the film. I have to love them.
The characters or the actors?
The characters.
Or both?
Both, actually. Yeah. Both. First, I start with the characters, and if you have actors who are soulmates too, that's great. That's good. You don't usually. Sometimes you don't get that, but if you're very lucky, if you
get it because you go back to the same actors.
That's one of the reasons I go back.
I want to work with people I love.
Yeah, we don't know each other. We know, you know. We'll look that take us and go, okay, let's move on.
Yeah, right.
That sort of thing. But also, I have the same philosophy too. De Niro has a certain philosophy. Keitel.
And it's the same philosophy you have. It's a shared philosophy.
Yeah, it is.
Which is?
Well, dealing with the subject matter, that we see it a certain way, and there's a certain truth that we try to get to. Joe Pesci too has that about a Raging Bull or about a Goodfellas or a Casino, that we just sense when something isn't quite right. We know that gesture is wrong. You know, you can't direct it. They have to be it. A guy like Pesci is it. Keitel to a certain extent, different, although he's in the wonderful range of like the piano and the Bad Lieutenant, stuff like this. He's amazing. And De Niro and myself, just one of those things. We seem to be drawn to the same subject matter, the same type of character, with very little articulation, verbal articulation about why, you know. And in a way, we just look at each other sometimes, and it's like, yeah, I know, yeah, okay. Yeah. You know what happens when that kind of thing happens? You know what the next move is. I said, yeah, well, all right, so we better not. That escalates everything. I said, no, that escalates everything. You can't do that to the person. You try to balance it out, but I think there's no doubt. I think we're interested in people who are flawed, people like ourselves. And to see if anybody else cares about them.
Yeah.
Right here, the white.
I'm wondering, when you're trying to make a film and you come up against obstacles and barriers, what do you attribute your strong dedication to getting that film made?
Really, hysteria, usually. Hysteria and obsession and anger, I think, mainly anger. I'm mad all the time. I might tell you, just, you know, angry, pain in the neck. That's why I use humor a lot, because it deflates myself. I don't want to take it seriously, because if I really do, I would have been gone much longer. 25 years ago, I wouldn't have survived. But the anger is enormous about everything. About everything. And so that also fuels me to make a picture, I think. But keeping the sense of humor is the key thing, the irony. The irony, when you get there in the morning and you get a note that one actor has had a nervous breakdown and he can't go on with the film. It happened. It happened.
They don't want to come out of it.
Yeah, they don't want to come out of the trailer. You know.
Go ahead, right here in the black sweater.
What are you going to do? Get a heart attack otherwise. Or you kill someone. You know, it's not good. That's true. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about the role of editing? You often work with the same editor. Do you think of editing as being your primary tool for completing your vision, or does it start somewhere else with everything?
That's a very good question about editing, because I do feel it's the primary tool. I mean, the scripting, structure, as much as possible. Like Goodfellas was all on the script. Age of Innocence, all on the script, based on the novel, of course, but it was restructured in the script. And Casino, all on the script, too. Kundun, we changed around the structure and the editing, but the editing for me is the most important part. It's the part I like the most. It's also torturous, but it is the best part. And I think there's a great deficiency I have in terms of lighting, in a way, or Mike would argue with that. But and I pointed out there's a story, Steve Spielberg has extraordinary lighting, and we know each other over 30-some-odd years. And he'd just get up there, okay, now 6,000 people coming from this frame, and then we pan over to, wait a minute, how's he doing all that? And the light beams in this way, and it's, my God, look at that light. Well, you know, we talk about stories and over the years, and I realized he came from Phoenix, Arizona, and it was a whole thing about a scene in Empire of the Sun where he knew it was a shot of the last samurai taking their sake against the rising sun, a real rising sun, and he was shooting in Shanghai. And I said, how did you get that shot? He said, well, I saw that in the morning. I got there before the crew, and I saw there was a mist on the ground. I knew that the sun would come up that way. And so I got the camera, and the cameraman wasn't even there. He got the assistant cameraman. He just shot it. And I said, see that? I said, I come from New York. All I saw were hallways, light bulbs. That's it, man. I never saw the sun. So I love John Ford, and you see the lighting in John Ford films. I can never do it, But in the case of Ballhaus, Michael Ballhaus, the lighting is very strong. But editing is very important. I remember Elia Kazan was very important in his films in my life, and he was one of the few. I think he was the only Hollywood director, quote unquote Hollywood, because he was really an independent. Came to talk at NYU because he was working at Lincoln Center at the time in 1965 with this brilliant film, America, America, had come out. And he just addressed the student body like this just for about an hour and a half. And he was, at that time, that wasn't done. You didn't get a director, forget it. There was no way they weren't going to come and talk to kids. So, anyway, he came in. He was in his raincoat, he was talking. And somebody asked him, and here's the man who invented, in a sense, modern theater in a way, and the acting style from 1947 on. And I didn't even realize that because I never went to theater. We couldn't afford theater. We were a working class thing. So just saw movies. But he said, some kid asked him, he said, well, if you're starting in the business now, what would you have done differently? Where would you have started? He said, I'd start in the editing room, he said, not in theater. It was very interesting because he found his way in cinema to a certain extent. Right after America, America kind of ebbed off, and he eventually wrote novels. But there are many other directors who find it in theater. And find it in theater, you see that reflected in many of the films made today, that they're more theater pieces to a certain extent. That's not a criticism, because some of them are quite extraordinary.
The white shirt there.
Could you talk a little bit about the breakdown of creative control on the pictures you've worked on, and what relationship or structural scheme has worked best between yourself, the producer, the DP, and the editor?
I could go from the DP and the editor. The editor I worked with in the past 20-some-odd years, Thelma Schoonmaker, whom I met at NYU. And, but I did Mean Streets and Alice and Taxi in New York, and Last Waltz without her. But then she came in on Raging Bull and stayed with me. She knows what I like, and she knows how to do it to a certain extent. And I usually give her I usually design the shots and the editing order in drawings way beforehand, in most cases. And so the creative control stays that way because she's a friend and she's very loyal. She will argue at times and discuss, and I say, okay, let me see what you got there. And very often, oh, leave it, it's good. You're Talking to Me sequence was done by one editor who was a great dean of editors in a sense, Tom Rolfe. He was helping edit. Marshall Lucas was the real editor on the film, and he came in for about a few weeks, Tom Rolfe, in cutting. And I showed him the rushes of this improvisation that De Niro did in front of the mirror. I said, I like that, I like that, I like that. And normally I sit there and work with them, but he doesn't work that way. So I said, okay, let me go out. Came back in the afternoon, he showed me that cut. I said, don't touch it. Do not touch it. Just let it be. It was just beautiful, flawless. And but normally I work very closely, but then I do some of the editing. I used to do some of the editing myself. Mean Streets I cut and that sort of thing, but I was not in the union, so you don't get credit for that, but on the film. But in any event, I felt the editing was very important. That's what I learned in school, and I learned how to design pictures by imagining the shots in my head. But the creative control with the studio is different with each project, I think. How do you say
I
it?
think on the editing side, though, you're being modest because you really you were the last director to not cut behind yourself as the film went, and you really worked yourself with Thelma. And this last picture, Gangs, which, by the way, Gangs this morning was nominated for 12 BAFTA Awards, which is the British Academy Awards, which has happened this morning.
That's what.
I think that the interesting thing to note on Gangs was when we saw the first cut of it in a screening room, there were 4 of us in the room, and it ran 3
hours, 38 minutes.
And
which is pretty good for a film that eventually was going to be about 2:48 or 2:46.
But the nature of the film was like it was a living organism, and what he did with it is that it changed in each cut into a metamorphosis of what you saw. If you saw the first cut of the film, even though it is the scenes that you see in the final cut, the work that Marty did on it is quite intricate in changing things.
What happens there too, Gangs of New York is an interesting example, because what happens there too is the editing becomes, I find in a lot of cases, it becomes also the extension of the writing and the rewriting, especially in Gangs and in other films that we made. A few other Kundun that happened a lot, where we restructured a lot of the film. And Kundun was difficult because it was abstract. It was, to grow as a filmmaker, I'm not interested in going towards a bigger $200 million film that is a splashy, beautifully made, chase pictures, things like that, action films. Other people are doing it much better than me. I can never do it. But I figured to try, between that and Age of Innocence, something to go inside rather than outside. And it was extremely difficult in Kundun because the nature of the drama was inaction as action. And that was very hard to sell in terms of drama. There was not traditional Western dramaturgy. I was going another way with it. And that was also helped and sort of rewritten in the editing with myself, Thelma, and the writer, Melissa. But in any event, the control of a picture, the more money, the more you have to fight for control.
In Gangs of New York, there's this wonderful scene where Happy Jack goes into the church, and he and Amsterdam have a confrontation, and then the walls fall, the scaffolding falls.
He kills him,
and the crucifix appears as an old master painting almost.
Yeah. That's a pretty pathetic reference to this great movie, Ashes and Diamonds by Andre Vajda. You got to see this one. This is amazing. This thing is just formative. Even the glasses with the fire on them was from Ashes and Diamonds. But that was about a young man played by a guy named Cebulski, who became sort of at the time the Polish James Dean. He was an extraordinary international star with sunglasses that we use the same sunglasses in Mean Streets as a reference too. And he was killed 3 years later at the age of 36 or something during the shoot of another Vajda film, by freak accident on a train. But he was an extraordinary actor, and Vajda was one of the great masters of world cinema. And basically, I don't want to get into the story of it, basically it's Warsaw, it's the end of the war, and he's been killing Nazis. Now all of a sudden he's hired to kill the latest communist official who's coming in to settle the town up, in Warsaw. And, it wasn't Warsaw, it was another city, but everything was destroyed. And he's talking with this young woman in one scene. You hear a creaking, and camera pulls back. They're in ruins. It's at night, and camera pulls back, and then suddenly you see an arm come into frame. It's swinging. It's a crucifix upside down. It's just, beyond belief. That's just one moment in that film. It's so beautiful because he's a man who kills. He's killing Nazis now. He has to kill communists, and he falls in love, though. The minute he falls in love, he gets killed. That's the end of the film. It all takes place in one night, and it's quite extraordinary. But that is because I know the original one. I say, well, that one's interesting, what we did, but...
So are there a lot of images from referential films over the past 50 years?
I think so, but in some cases they were, inspired and pushed me to go further. In other cases, they're just, you just cannot do what a shot like that is so, it's clearly in Ashes and Diamonds, you can't do that. So, but the emotional power of it, I think, I try to get the similar emotional power by the scaffolding to be crashing, and then suddenly the dust comes up and you see the crucifix over the...
Let's talk about emotional power film, because I think it's a really interesting point. On 2 clips here, and you and I were sort of whispering to each other about it. In Mean Streets, you've got that wonderful tracking scene when Bobby's walking in and you see Harvey Keitel.
Jumping Jack Flash, yeah.
And Against Music, which is an interesting theme that Marty was one of the first filmmakers to really use contemporary music in an interesting way. to drive storyline and change the emotions of the audience without them even realizing what was happening. And you see the camera move in on Keitel, and he's not moving at all. He's almost like statuary.
Yeah.
And the camera moves in on him. We see that again, and we see it in Goodfellas, and we see it in Casino with that scene where De Niro has no dialogue at all.
I know, he's hooked, he's doomed.
But you're telling a story without any words at all.
I try not to, but when you're going to have the words, I mean, you do a scene like the improvisation between De Niro and Keitel in the back room, which gives you an example. That's literally the way I grew up, and it was inspired by De Niro. He said, I think we have to see Johnny Boy work on Charlie. We got to see why he's charming. We got to see why Charlie loves him. And that was, I said, okay, and we shot that. We begged the producers for like half a day more shooting, and we got that just in 3 setups, bang, and wide and over the shoulder. But I don't mind, as I say, you know, Bergman film, sometimes a 25-minute monologue goes through, and it's just extraordinary.
One last question. You mentioned that you were up until last night, or early this morning, shooting. What is the story of The Departed, which is what you're shooting?
This is interesting. This is written by William Monahan, and it's a story about informers in the police and also in a mob gang in Boston, which is kind of loosely based on a famous gangster who is still on the loose, so to speak, in the past 15 years, but turned out to be an FBI informant. As I was doing it, in some scenes, I said, wait a minute, I did this, didn't I? It's a story about the 2 boys, the gangster who puts one in as an informant, and the other one who's going to inform against him is almost like their father. And all of this, fathers and sons and gangs in New York and raging bullets, all there, it's all coming back, and I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, what am I? And in a sense, it's the exploration of similar themes, but also the chance to do something of an extraordinarily, I think, complex storytelling, which I always find very difficult to do plot. I enjoy working with characters because the actors somehow flourish and they create such wonderful things. Character and mood and story. But plot, I find difficult to, the logic of it. Where to aim that lens to let the audience know what the plot point is, aside from cutting to a giant close-up. And even that, if you cut to it the wrong time, the audience is not going to know. Yeah. And that's real filmmaking. That's very hard. And this is an excruciating test, again, to try to do this sort of thing.